Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Tech Data Microsoft Enterprise Mobility webinar. All lines have been placed on listen only to prevent any background noise. Thank you. I would now like to turn the conference over to Natalie Ulloa. You may begin your call.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for attending. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. There's a Q&A box on the right hand of your screen. You can type in any questions that you may have throughout the webinar, and JJ will answer those at the end. Also, one lucky webinar attendee today will win a Philips Pocket Projector. We'll contact you after the webinar is over. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to JJ Antequino, our Partner Technology Strategist for Microsoft.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. JJ Antequino here, and thanks for joining us on today's webcast on the Enterprise Mobility Suite. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we did talk a little bit about the Enterprise Mobility Suite. I'm going to go over some of the same slides, but we had a little more of a focus on Azure Active Directory, right? So when you think about identity, those are the three letters you think of, AAD. But in this particular webcast, what I wanted to do is kind of still give you that high-level overview of the Enterprise Mobility Suite, because you may be witnessing the first EMS webcast of our series. So if you start off here, that's fine as well, so you're going to get that intro. But then I'm going to dive into Microsoft Intune, and hopefully you'll think about Microsoft Intune in a little bit of a different way than you might have in the past, because we've made a lot of changes to Intune. We've really tried to refocus that solution and really make it part of the broader set of Enterprise Mobility Suite offerings. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, I kind of showed this slide before, and I think it makes a really good representation of what you're seeing in your customers today. Right, I mean, there's so many different moving parts that you have to consider when you think about a mobility solution for an end customer, and just all their data and their devices in general, right? I mean, when you're a partner working with a customer, you've got to think about the actual users and all the things that they might do. You've got to protect those users from themselves. You've got all the different apps that they're using. I mean, are they using valid apps? Are they downloading freeware? Are they downloading apps that may have viruses already kind of built in because they downloaded it from an unknown source? Then you've also got that confidential data you've got to protect. And then when you have all those three things together, then we talk about the devices. Right? Are they using an iPad? Are they using an Android tablet? Are they using a Windows phone? Are they using a Surface? You know, there's so many different ways to have all that data and all those apps installed by all those users. You got to figure out how that's going to work. And so, you know, from a concern perspective, we've got data leaks, we've got lost devices, we've got compromised identity because people are sharing passwords, or maybe someone phished them and got that username and password out of them. And then what else are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that all these users and their data and their apps and their devices, they're interacting with customers, they're interacting with other employees, or they might be interacting with some of their business partners. So Microsoft really wants to think about this and get it more organized. How is it possible to keep up? Well, the Microsoft vision is to organize your users, your devices, your apps, and data, put it on a platform where you can now have all the security that you need, as well as still be able to interact with additional employees, business partners, and customers, and so forth. So here you're going to be able to access everything from anywhere, right? So, you know, if I'm located at my desk, if I'm located at home, if I'm at a customer's site, how do I access my data and still keep it secure? And then finally, we want to be able to integrate with what you have. I mean, if you are already selling Office 365, Enterprise Mobility Suite is just a natural extension onto what you have. If you already have a domain on premises, if you already have some software as a service apps that you're trying to run alongside what you've got on premises today, how do we connect all those things together and maintain those investments? So with the Enterprise Mobility Suite, you know, customers need those secure users, those secure devices, those secure apps, and that secure data. And again, they need access to it from just about everywhere. And so when we preserve those investments and move to the cloud, you finally want to give them that solution that is integrated, that gives them that secure identity, protects what they love and use today, which is Office, hopefully, and that it just works, right? I mean, if you've got all these moving parts, we want it to all work together nice and smoothly. And so what we have with those solutions together is really thinking about the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And so I'm going to break down kind of the high-level conversation of the Enterprise Mobility Suite into three different areas, because you can really, and just like Office 365, described, you can really kind of take your Enterprise Mobility Suite practice into different areas of focus. And really it's identity-driven security, managed mobile productivity, and simply just putting this all together as a comprehensive solution. So let's go ahead and start off here with identity-driven security, and then we'll go into the other two here in just a second. This is an interesting statistic that I learned recently, right? When you think about exploited credentials, 75% of the time, right, the reason why there's been a network breach is because those credentials of a user have been exploited. And so we need to find a better way to detect when credentials have been exploited and find a better way to secure our users from themselves from leaking those credentials unexpectedly. And so the first component we'll talk about is having that one common identity. With the Enterprise Mobility Suite, we're going to offer that single sign-on capability that gives you easy connection to those existing assets that you have inside of your environment. And this kind of spans both the areas of identity as well as, managed applications and managed devices. But if I am, a modern app user today, I'm not just using stuff that's installed on my desktop specifically. I might be connecting to things like Dropbox or Google or Amazon or, or Salesforce.com, even non-Microsoft stuff. We want to be able to connect to that. And as an IT person or as a Microsoft partner, you realize that if I am connecting to all these different services, that means that I've got to find a way to manage all the usernames and passwords for all those services for all those users. Again, single sign-on is one of those capabilities that we want to be able to deliver to our end users. And so we also want to give that unified experience across user devices. Again, I'll talk about this later on in the managed devices section, but if a user wants to be able to get access to their Microsoft service and clouds and other cloud services, and they're doing it from an iPad or from a Windows PC or from an Android tablet, you want to still give them that same look and feel. And at the same time, when they are accessing or you are giving them access to those applications, maybe one user is allowed to see Salesforce.com because they are really taking care of CRM and customer relationship management, right? But that's not for everyone. And so we still want to give that unified look and feel so when someone logs in from whatever device that they're on, they're only given access to whatever they need to access. We also want to make sure that when I bring a new device into an organization, that the identity that I'm using to log into that device allows me to get specific provisioning features down to me, like my email. Maybe there are specific device states that need to be put in place as a user that's logging into this service. And what I think is really interesting on the right-hand side here with the self-service capabilities is that as a partner, as a reseller, as possibly a managed service provider, some of the mundane tasks that are out there that take up your time as an MSP, you want to offload onto that end customer, onto that end user. Things as simple as password resets or adding people to different groups. When I was doing a little research on this, we found that even though it sounds like something that's minor, right, just resetting someone's password, that takes up valuable portions of someone's time because they've got to respond to an email, they've got to reset that password, they've got to make sure the user is properly authenticating, and they estimate that that costs an individual about $10 to $20 worth of their time to make sure that password has been reset properly. So a lot of this self-service functionality can be built in using the Enterprise Mobility Suite. We want to protect users as well from themselves, like I said, from leaking those credentials, right? A lot of times people, if they don't feel like it's a mission-critical type of application or it doesn't have any of their quote-unquote personal information, they may be freely giving out a username or password to some certain asset. And so we want to stop that from happening, right? If a user is supposed to have access to something, that user is the only one that's supposed to have access to those credentials. So we can do things like multi-factor authentication. So a user tries to log into a specific service or into a specific SharePoint site, they type in their credentials, and they've only got access to what they've got access to, but they can't just do it with their username and password. They've actually got to have another device or a second way to actually authenticate them in there. So we can do it, for example, like having an app on your phone that you have to type in a PIN. We can actually call a specific phone number aligned with that user, so they've got to type in a couple buttons to make sure that they are actually the person logging in. And why this is important is because when you think about leak credentials in general, I mean, first of all, we don't want people to just be spreading their usernames and passwords everywhere, but let's say someone maliciously achieves access to someone's username and password. Using intelligent analysis and machine learning and actually getting some security reporting out of this, we can do behavioral analysis. I'll give you an example. Let's say I am logging into my PC, and I don't know if you know this, but I live in Orlando, Florida. I travel to Tech Data in Clearwater quite frequently, and I also work out of that Microsoft office. So those are three offices that I normally log into. Right, so that means that I'm going to probably be a Florida-based employee. So let's say I log in at 1 p.m., at 2 p.m., at 3 p.m., all from Florida. That's normal behavior. But let's say it's sometime around 2:30 p.m. while I'm supposed to be logged into Florida, there's another authentication attempt happening in Japan. That's not normal behavior. EMS and the components within it will recognize that that's not normal behavior, and it will let the administrator know that we've got to check out what might be happening there. It could be that I literally gave someone my username and password, but it could also be some malicious hacker trying to authenticate all the way over there from Japan. So, some of the ways we also improve security are to take a look at a mobile device. And you kind of see this when you go to maybe like an airport or into a bookstore, and you see a tablet there, and you try to click around in that tablet, but you can only do a couple of things. So the device has kind of been locked down. You can only run a couple of apps, for example. You can't access the web browser because it's just supposed to be for running some specific store or airport type apps. That's what we do when we guard apps and prevent users from doing anything malicious on those devices, because if that device has access to our internal network, it could do more damage than what we really require users in that external or public space to actually have access to. So those are some of the things that we think about with identity-driven security, right? We want to lock down a device to a user or to at least recognize when a user is using a device. But we also need to make sure that we're protecting that actual device and all the apps that are on there. Did you know that 80% of users at some point they've actually sorry, I was just taking a look at some of the question and answer pane here, but they have recognized that users have admitted that they have used unsecured apps. So that's 80% of users. That's a lot of users. Almost everyone has used an unsecured app. And what an unsecured app could be is anything that's not authorized by IT. And so that could be, for example, a freeware app that they downloaded. It could be something that they found on the internet because their friends told them it was a good app for them to try out and use. But if they use that app in a business, that could open that business up to a couple of different things. First of all, if it is an application that was downloaded from some unknown source, then that application, again, like I mentioned earlier, might have a virus or some type of malware built into it that's now pulling information from the business. And in fact, I think that another funny statistic, or scary statistic actually, is that once something malicious gets into a network, it's not until 200 days later on average that that malicious attack has been actually identified. Another example of an unsecured app would be, for example, I see a great free app that I download and I use inside of my business. Well, that free app, if you really look at the end user license agreement, may only be used when I am a consumer or I am at home. But if I use that app inside of a business setting, then there's actually a fee associated with it. So if that end customer, or rather the business owner, gets audited and they see that freeware app on there and they're not authorized to use it, there could be fines that come along with that. So my point is, we want to be able to manage mobile productivity along with all the apps that are on those devices. So some of the ways we do it is we do it with conditional access. First of all, we want to make sure that the device itself is going to not be allowed on the network until it's actually been vetted and made sure that we've checked all the settings on there and make sure it's not, for example, like a jailbroken iPad or iPhone. And then we're going to make sure that we enforce that compliance before we let that device on there. So we're going to give them ways to remediate their device by installing certain hot fixes or certain applications before it can get onto the network. We also want to make sure that that we can manage all of our apps on our devices, whether or not that device is fully enrolled inside of the Enterprise Mobility Suite, or if it's just an application that's accessing some of our information. And the gold standard for all this, and you're going to see this when you start doing your demos for Enterprise Mobility Suite and practicing on your own, is you'll notice that the gold standard for an app that would be running on a device like this would be something like Office. We've built our Office mobile apps with Enterprise Mobility Suite in mind, with being able to give you a way to protect your devices on a personal level as well as a commercial level. This is kind of what I'm talking about right here, and I'll drive into this a little bit later. We want to make sure that when consumers install a device on their, install an application on their device, there is the ability to have a multi-identity policy. We want end users to be able to enjoy the devices that they bring into an environment, but also know that our commercial or our corporate data is going to be protected. And so when you think about a managed app, you think about the fact that these are things that we're telling an end customer that they can use, so we get to control what happens with the data inside of that managed app. So kind of just going through this really quickly. I mean, we're going to have a persistent protection, tracking compliance to make sure that we've got the proper reporting when someone does something that they probably shouldn't, or they're trying to access the network with a device that shouldn't be accessed with, and we're going to integrate this across all of our different platforms. So when you bring it all together, we've got a really good comprehensive solution with the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And so what we found here is that by 2017, at a minimum, businesses of all sizes are going to be investing at least 25% of their IT budgets into the into the mobility sector, right? I mean, so they've already probably taken care of Office 365, so they've got productivity going. Where's the next step for them? It's really to secure their environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the way the architecture works and how you can kind of divide up how you want to deploy EMS. First of all, EMS is always going to be up to date. It's a cloud service, right? So the Intune portion specifically, it's been around for a while, and as we get new updates, you see that the Intune console does change, and we get some new features and benefits there, right? So we're going to be able to keep up with you because we're always up to date, and as new devices come, they're going to be able to be accessed via Intune as well. We're going to work with what you have, right? So if you have multiple platforms, again, multiple devices, we're going to work with what you have and also still use those existing investments. So if you have Active Directory, if you have System Center, for example, and you already are managing some of your devices there, but you want to move this into a cloud service, System Center and Intune work very well together. It's simple to set up and easy to connect. So these are the specific components of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. Taken as a whole, you think of it kind of like Office, right? If I sell someone Office, within Office you've got Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and so forth, right? Those different applications. But you tie it all together and you've got that Office suite. Same with Office 365. When I sell someone Office 365, I'm selling them, a whole suite of services as well. SharePoint, Exchange, Skype. With the Enterprise Mobility Suite, it works very similarly, right? So we've got the Azure Active Directory that really controls that identity and access management, but it's still a big piece of device identity as well, right, when a user logs in. We've got Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics as it pertains to, the behavioral analysis of how people are logging in. Microsoft Intune is going to be specific to the mobile device and app management. And then when you talk about data and taking that extension of protecting that data and leaking it out of a company, that's where Azure Rights Management comes into place. But we've also got another component that can be purchased outside of EMS, just to kind of give you a little highlight of it as well here, called Microsoft Cloud App Security, that brings additional security and protection to some of your other various cloud apps. So when you take a look at these included services within EMS, the total cost per user per month is $8.75. If you did this through other vendors or through other point solutions, you wouldn't get the same value and the same integration that you would with EMS that works seamlessly across the Microsoft stack. One of the other things that's not included inside of this little chart here is that Microsoft EMS not only gives you Azure AD and Advanced Threat Analytics and so forth, but it also gives you a Server CAL license that's licensed on a monthly basis. So instead of buying Windows Server CALs with SA, now you can buy Windows Server CAL through Microsoft EMS, and so you're always up to date there. So let's say you do have some on-premises servers that you're still attaching to, you're covered with Microsoft EMS as well. So why Microsoft? Well, if you didn't know this, Enterprise Mobility Suite and the Azure Active Directory component behind it is the same Azure Active Directory type of system that runs Office 365. So when you add EMS onto Office 365, you are naturally extending the security that you're going to get out of that. Then when you think about devices and being able to now kind of move towards a quote-unquote serverless society where everything is in the cloud or you're connecting from a mobile perspective with the new technologies with AD Connect built into Windows 10, now you have a way to build that complete mobile solution and it all works seamlessly together. So kind of just to give you an example here of some of the things that we do over and above Office 365 is that we do have basic multi-factor authentication for Office 365, but when I want to start extending my multi-factor authentication to other cloud services, that's when I've got to think about the Enterprise Mobility Suite and Azure AD in there. It also is going to give us advanced security reporting on the types of access that's happening within that environment for all of my cloud apps. So, for example, I can with Enterprise Mobility Suite, I can say that, you know what, everyone seems to be accessing Office 365 just fine, but I'm noticing that there's a lot of misauthentication attempts to another cloud service. Or I'm doing some reporting on all these other cloud services, and I'm noticing that, you know, we have licenses for 50 people, but only 2 or 3 people are actually logging into that third-party cloud service. Maybe it's not something that we actually need, or we need to reduce our licensing there. For mobile device management, we've got things like device wipe with Office 365, but when you want to actually do certificate provisioning, integrating this with System Center as well as mobile app management, which I'll talk about in the Intune portion, you don't have that built in with the with just Office 365. RMS protection, that's a pretty good one that we got inside of Office 365, admittedly. You know, so if I want to be able to take a look at a document and say that document cannot be printed, that document cannot be sent out of the organization, you know, I can't do any copying of it, for example. We've got that within Office 365 per se, but when you extend that to files and folders that I might have on local servers that may still be in existence, we don't get that same type of information protection unless you add on something like Advanced RMS that's included with the Enterprise Mobility Suite. All right, so let's go and move into the Microsoft Intune portion. But let me, you know, before I do that, I think I've got a couple of questions I can answer here really quick. So, since we're kind of on topic, does the Windows CAL count for accessing Azure Windows Server? Well, the good news is, you know, the Windows CAL that I talked about with EMS is primarily for accessing on-premises servers. Because if you do have a Windows Server VM that you've got spun up in Azure, the good news is that the CALs are already included in there. So you don't actually have to purchase any additional CALs for a Windows Server provision inside of, you know, an Azure VM there. Let me see what else I've got here. Okay, so EMS, you know, we've taken a different approach. I've got a question here about creating separate corporate containers on the mobile device versus the personal data and apps on the device. EMS, again, has taken a different approach to how we manage data, right? So when I have an application, and that application is one that's managed by Intune or managed by EMS, that is how we kind of create the dividing line between whether or not the data is going to be protected or considered corporate data. So and we've also got an Intune wrapper that can make an app that's not necessarily a Microsoft app wrapped up and realize that this is going to be corporate data because the app itself is going to be corporate focused, but we're not actually creating a separate like corporate folder, I guess you could say, like some of the other vendors out there. And maybe it'll become more clear when I talk about Intune here. So with Microsoft Intune, which is the mobility management piece of devices within EMS, we were really focused on 3 areas, okay? So the first area is thinking about the mobile devices themselves. So when I talk about a mobile device, I'm talking about a device that does not have a full operating system installed on it. Like, if I'm running Windows 10 on for example, on a Windows PC or a Windows laptop, that's not necessarily what I would call a mobile device. I mean, I know we're kind of in the gray area because you've got Surfaces and you've got Windows tablets and so forth, and that still is kind of that same device or mobile experience. But in a sense, what we're trying to get across here is that we've taken a look at Intune and we've said this is not just about managing Windows PCs. If you recall, that's all we could do in the past. So we've really made Intune into a mobile device platform. We're also saying that it's not just the mobile devices themselves, but all the applications that are going to be on those devices. We've already created some, I guess you could call gold standard applications with our Office applications like Word and Outlook and Excel and OneDrive and PowerPoint, but you may have some other applications that you want to manage with Microsoft Intune and EMS, and we allow you to do that with our solution. And then finally, where you're going to actually get the most granular type of management for your PCs, because we've been working with Windows since it's been developed, and we created Windows. You're going to have the best PC management solution also with Microsoft Intune within the EMS. And so I'll kind of dive into these 3 areas here. So this is what we think about when you actually build out a complete, comprehensive life cycle for your mobile devices. I want to kind of spin through this and show you what the life cycle is like for a device. First of all, when I bring a new device into an organization, I'm going to want to enroll that device inside of the Enterprise Mobility Suite. And what that means is basically letting EMS and Intune know that I have brought a new device into the organization, and I want to make sure that device is going to be able to allow me to interact with, the data, with the apps, with the services that I want to get access to. So when a device has been enrolled, we then want to think about that device and say, what do we need to have on that device to make sure that it can truly interact in our environment? And that's where the provisioning happens. This is where we're going to deploy security policies, where we're going to install the mandatory apps, or we're going to also deploy specific app restriction policies. And now we've got a device here that we feel safe having on our network. After the provisioning process happens, it's now going to be continuously managing and protecting that device. So, let's say someone does get on and the state of that device is perfect, but then they said, hey, I'm pretty sneaky. I'm going to jailbreak my device now so I can install some other apps. Well, guess what, buddy? You're not coming back on even though we let you on the first place. So we're going to continue to manage, protect our infrastructure from those devices that came on. We're also at this point right here going to be managing and protecting all the data, right? So if a customer gets on and they have a great personal device that they've brought on, they love doing everything on there, we're going to protect the corporation by saying, yeah, I mean, I know you use this personally, but you can't take your data and if that's from a corporate focus and move it into anything personally related. And I'll show you kind of a little screenshot on that in just a little bit. So once a user says, okay, this device was great, I've used it for many months or a couple of years, but I'm ready for a new one, how do we then take a device that was working very well on our infrastructure and realize that now we're going to retire it. We want to remove it from our system. We want to wipe it, or we want to clean it up. We don't want that device to have any more access to the infrastructure. What's that all about? And so we can do some type of wipes, both complete wipes of a device and also selective wipes that I'll go over here in just a second. So this is kind of the dashboard for Microsoft Intune. If you haven't logged into Microsoft Intune in many years, you'll see that we have moved to this new tile interface, which is a really cool graphical interface or kind of a tiled interface that you're probably familiar with Microsoft by now, where here's where you can see all of your alerts. You can manage software deployments. You can configure and deploy policies. Here's where you can get a lot of reporting, kind of that BI, that business intelligence type of reporting that you'd like to see to make quick decisions. Also based on on your level of security or role base in a organization, that'll allow you to see what you're allowed to see. We also wanted to take a look at devices that are just coming in during that enrollment process, right, in the provisioning process, and say, you know, here's Jane. She has many devices that she's going to be logging into our environment with. And when she does so, we want to make sure that we collect the proper hardware properties for the mobile devices that are connected. So, you know, once we do that, we'll get a good idea of what's running in the environment and what types of devices Jane's using to access that environment. That way we know that once we have an inventory of the hardware properties along with kind of the company assets that are on there, if we notice that there's any unusual behavior, you know, when Jane authenticates, she's supposed to be authenticating from this iPad, from this Windows device, from this Android tablet, and those are really her devices, but now she's logging in from something completely brand new. Is that out of the ordinary? Right, so again, we want to tie that all together. So once we have all that stuff put together, we're able to do some great reporting on the inventory for, you know, from corporate app as well as hardware. So let's enable our users to be productive once we've got all that inventory in place. So this is, again, example of Jane right here. She's got, you know, Surface, she's got a Android tablet, and she has an iPad. So she lets Microsoft Intune know that these are the devices that I want to use and that are going to be the standard for my authentications. Microsoft Intune is then at that point going to start provisioning all the things that we need to have on that device. So we're going to deploy a VPN and Wi-Fi policies. We're going to deploy certain certificates that are going to allow us to make that connection so that we know that that's an authenticated device. We're going to start deploying and installing apps on there that are required for her line of work, right? We're also going to then start applying and enforcing device configuration policies. Now, once that stuff has been done, you know, advance this slide right here, we also need to think specifically about how she's going to start using email. And so with Microsoft Intune, you know, we don't want users to have to know where to type in any server information or where they really got to configure this or set up certificates. We can actually use Microsoft Intune to deploy an email profile directly to the device upon enrollment. So this is going to configure all the account settings, all security settings. For example, we're going to require her to use a PIN in order to log in. We're going to require them to do multi-factor authentication whenever they log in. And we're going to be able to allow them now to synchronize all their email tasks and contacts and calendaring without having to have any interaction. Because the first time that they logged in and did that enrollment, that's when they identified themselves as a user, right? So we're going to take care of all the email settings to get them on the go as quickly as possible. So what's great about this is that, you know, when we enroll and set up email for a user, you know, if they're on a business trip and their phone gets broken or they lose their phone, so they've got to go to the nearest wireless store and pick up a brand new phone, they're up and running in no time. This is just showing you just a little bit of a flow chart of how that works. So when I think about applications that are now running on these enrolled and provisioned devices, there are kind of three ways that we manage applications. First of all, it's with the Azure AD Premium portion of Software as a Service apps. So a software as a service app, as you know, is a quote-unquote completed service or a finished goods service, which could be, you know, obviously Office 365, CRM Online, and some of the stuff that we're doing a great job of here at Microsoft. But you've also got your third-party apps. Now, there's nothing that's actually installed in the customer's environment from a server perspective because those are running in the cloud. We want to make sure that we can manage who has access to what and give them that single sign-on capability with the Azure AD Premium portion of EMS. Now, there may be, for example, some applications that we want to deploy onto each device, and those are going to be native apps that are running on the device. So it might be an app that we're deploying, for example, on an iPad or deploying on a Windows device that has to, quote-unquote, be installed on that application. We can manage that using the Intune portion. Now, we've finally also got them that we're not going to talk about this too much, but there are some applications that can't be installed. They're running on a terminal server, for example, and we want to make that now manageable from the cloud. We've got a great service inside of Azure called Remote App that allows you to take remote desktop type services that can't be actually installed because you can't install maybe, for example, a line of business app on an iPad, but you could use remote desktop services to do that. We can do that with the remote app functionality of Microsoft Azure, but have all of those apps managed from the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So once I've designed, all the apps that I'm going to have that are going to be installed on these devices, we want to now create that consistent experience and kind of like an app launcher for all these apps. We want to make it seamless to the end user so that when they log into their portal, their self-service portal, now they see all the apps that they've got access to, whether or not they be software as a service apps, natively installed apps, or remote app type of applications. So this is a consistent experience across your Windows phones, your Android devices, your iPad, your iOS devices. And what's cool about this is that users now see what they're allowed to run inside of their corporation, because these are the quote-unquote managed apps. If they're using anything outside of these apps, they're not secured apps. They're not authorized specific apps, right? And so those are not things that they're permitted to install, and so they know what they're allowed to use. Here we can create, customized terms and conditions for using these applications. It also gives us a way to quickly contact IT. I talked about this a little bit earlier, right? As a business manager, that has a device, I may want to lock that device down for specific reasons. Like if I go to a restaurant and I have a menu that's on a tablet, that menu, right, it should only be showing you the food that you can order, the drinks that you can order. I shouldn't be able to play Candy Crush, or I shouldn't be able to go on there and start surfing the web. I mean, you could let them do that if that's what you wanted to do, but if I want to lock a device down, how do I do that? Microsoft Intune, again, can push down policies to that device so that only the menu comes up on that tablet. If I'm in a school environment and I've got some applications that I want students to be using, right? Only school education-related apps, again, no games on there, I want to lock down those tablets. Same thing with a retail store, right? If I am a retail employee and I'm walking around and, doing inventory, or if I am helping a customer out to see if things are in stock, that device should be locked down to just doing retail-related items. So those are some examples of locking down devices, and using Microsoft Intune, we can actually do that lockdown. At the same time, we can have multiple users access that same device and have a customized experience based on how they're logging into that device. So it's a pretty cool way to set that up using Microsoft Intune. So let's talk a little bit about how Intune protects that corporate data from virtually anywhere. When you think about corporate access to controlling access to corporate data on a traditional on-premises type of mindset, normally what you'll see is you'll have mobile devices, you'll have PCs, you'll have a walled-off network because it's all happening on-premises, right? Users, devices, apps, data, they all reside in that on-premises data center. And so when you have that local network, everything's kind of in that walled garden right there. So there isn't that much protection when you think about accessing the data and the apps that are outside of that kind of walled garden, right? And so the perimeter or the network boundary cannot really protect that data stored in the cloud. And so you've got to think of a way to do that, because there are software as a service types apps like Office 365, for example, that you're accessing from your on-premises site into the cloud that you want to provide additional security to. And so with the Enterprise Mobility Suite being kind of that intermediary, now we can take that managed cloud and your on-premises environment and control access using our tools there. So this is an example right here of how we might do conditional access with EMS. If a user is logging in on premises and we want to give them access to corporate apps, part of the device state that we might say is that it has to have, some specific hot fixes or needs to have antivirus installed before it can be allowed on. But we can also say that if your PC is not part of a specific IP range, we're not going to let you get access to those corporate apps. So that's an example right there of conditional access with EMS. Once we're logged in the proper network, so we're actually plugged in with a physical cable or on that specific Wi-Fi network, then we should be good to go. But if someone's trying to do it like they're sitting out in the parking lot trying to log in or trying to get access that way, not going to happen. All right, so let me build this out right here. Conditional access for Office 365. Like I said, we want to extend how we get access to Office 365. And so earlier I showed you a slide of why EMS, because it works better with Office 365. This is kind of an idea of how this might work right here if I'm logging in from a mobile device. Office 365 what we'll try to do from whatever mobile device is attempt to make an email connection. Office 365 will then take a look and authorize the user and find out whether or not that device is managed and is it actually compliant. We're going to return the device state to Office 365, and if that device is not compliant, we then push it into quarantine. So the question is, what are you using right now to actually do the quarantining process and do the proper provisioning? Well, in our case, using EMS, the quarantine or remediation steps are really going to be accessed here inside of Microsoft Intune. Here's where we're going to do that full enrollment of that device to make sure that it's actually compliant. We're going to do the remediation, and after that, we're going to make sure that the compliance for that device is now set in Azure Active Directory so that we know that that device has complied properly, and then we're going to go ahead and grant access to that to email in Office 365. So we're adding an additional layer of compliance rather than just letting anyone come in with whatever mobile device that they're going to want to come in on. So we're enforcing corporate data. We're taking a look at all this stuff right here. And what we want to do here is we want to make sure that we also prevent data leakage, enforce encryption of app data at rest, and also give you that app selective white. So for example, when I think about enforcing corporate data access requirements, it might mean that I want to make sure that I have to require a PIN before I actually launch an app. If I'm going to get access to an app, I want to all the time have corporate credentials be inputted before I access that specific app. If I want to access another app, maybe I need to have compliance for a specific device policy before I let that device get onto that corporate data. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier with preventing that data leakage on that device, but sometimes users do this to themselves, right? They hit reply all by accident, or they're not thinking and they cut and paste an email, and when they do, they hit the to button, they start typing some names really quickly, and they realize this is not supposed to go to any external employees. So we want to prevent that stuff from happening, and using Intune as well as the information rights management that's built into EMS, we can do that collectively. All right, so let's kind of go back to that question that I had a little bit earlier ago about creating that custom container. This is what mobile application management looks like on a device with Microsoft Intune and EMS, right? We want to take a look at the device. So here we've got an iPad, and we realize that users are going to want to install stuff on this device that might not all be company related. You know, I mean, if I want to have my corporate information on there and I still want to be able to watch Netflix or, you know, play some games, I still want to be able to do that because it's my device. I'm the one that brought it into the organization, right? And so when you take a look at this device, we're going to say that there are some managed apps like Outlook, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, OneDrive, and Skype for Business. And at the same time, we're also going to say that there are some personal apps on there. So you've got Twitter and Kindle and Netflix and Facebook and so forth. And so we kind of put those apps into two separate containers. And now we've got managed apps, and then we've got personal apps. So all the data that's aligned with these managed apps, if they come from a source that is a quote-unquote managed source as well, like Office 365 or some type of business account that we have associated with these managed apps, then that's what's going to be protected, right? So we have selective kind of enforcement of those policies. So an example would be even just creating a Word document. In that Word document, you might have some corporate data. So that data might have come from, you know, from OneDrive for Business, or that data might have come from a SharePoint site. But you've also got some personal data on there, such as, you know, me creating a flyer for my, my son's soccer team, or creating, just writing down some recipes. That personal data is your data as an end user, and if my device were to no longer be part of my access to the corporation, then I still want to keep that stuff, and Microsoft keeps that stuff for them on that device. So this is what it would kind of look like. So let's say I am using Outlook and I'm logged in with my Office 365 corporate account, and inside that Outlook piece of mail that I get, there's an attachment which is an Excel spreadsheet. So when I look at that Excel spreadsheet, I do have the access to and the ability to actually copy information from the cells inside of that Excel spreadsheet. However, let's say once I do that copy and I decide that I want to paste it, I try to paste it into a personal app. So I try to paste it into maybe a notepad that's not a managed application by Intune or by EMS, right? It's not going to let me. It's not going to allow me to paste that information into the personal app. However, let's say I decide to create a new document in Word, or I've already got an existing one. I can paste it there because this is part of a managed application environment. If I then go ahead and try to save that Word document into personal storage, so that might just be OneDrive for consumers, right? Not OneDrive for business specifically, but if I try to save that into Dropbox, for example, or if I try to save that document into Box.com or something like that, it's not going to allow me to do that because that personal storage is not a managed application. So what I can do, though, however, is I could save it directly into OneDrive for Business because that is a OneDrive for Business account that I'm logged into, and we're all happy. So when it comes to Microsoft Intune then saying, hey, there's a user that's no longer accessing our service anymore, we've removed that device, we're unenrolling it, what will happen at that point is that we will uninstall all the managed apps and all the data that was on that device aligned with those managed apps, but leave all the personal stuff for them. So they can still have, the Netflix movies that they watch, their Facebook application still on there, any Word documents that were saved to their personal device, that will be able to still remain as well. So we haven't gotten rid of all that stuff. So you can see here that we've got multiple layers of protection going on. From just an identification of a user, an authorization of a user, you're using Azure Active Directory Premium to do all of that. When we start protecting the device, you're looking at Microsoft Intune and also the apps within it. And then when you think about the data, so for example, being able to send out a document, copy a document, print a document, do a screen capture, anything like that, when we lock it down like that, we're actually using Microsoft Azure Rights Management in order to protect us. So we've got multiple layers using the EMS suite that's going to make sure our customers are safe and secure. So I talked a little about this earlier. There are some people who have existing investments. They've already got System Center. So the good news is that Intune will integrate with that. But I want to be clear that Intune and EMS does not necessarily require any existing investments on premises unless you're using some of the more enhanced type of stuff, right? But from everything that I've showed you today, it only requires Intune inside of the cloud for you to manage your mobile PCs and mobile devices. At the bottom there, you can see the devices that are supported with Intune standalone in the cloud. Windows PCs, Windows RT, Windows Phone, iOS, Android, and OS X. No existing infrastructure necessary. You don't need to have System Center Configuration Manager in there. You've got simple policy control, and that's always going to be up to date because it's a cloud-based service. Now, if you do want a little bit more granularity and control, that's when you would enter in with something like System Center Configuration Manager to add into your infrastructure. Again, this would require you to have some type of server to install System Center on, but then it again gives you some more granularity for not only Windows-based and mobile device type infrastructure or devices, but also looking at things like Linux, for example, if you want deeper control and remote control. In fact, I've kind of got a little bit of a chart here when it comes to PC management. On the left-hand side, when you talk about Intune, it is agentless. It's pretty lightweight. When you talk about about Intune standalone, if it's agentless, right? For example, from a mobile device standpoint, but if you do want that PC granularity, you're going to have to think about installing an agent on those PCs to capture that information and send it back to Microsoft Intune. But not only do you have that basic management capability that I've talked to from a PC perspective, but you've also got antivirus built into the PCs that you're going to be managing there. Any updates that are going to happen to your PCs, that's going to be managed by Microsoft Intune. If you're going to do software distribution from the cloud to your mobile devices, you can do that through Microsoft Intune. It's also going to give you the proactive monitoring and alerts, as well as hardware and software inventory. And again, what's awesome about this is that this does not even require a domain controller. Right, so if you're thinking about moving to that serverless society like I mentioned, Microsoft Intune can definitely help there with all the devices that are connecting to all of your corporate resources. But if you do want some more granularity, like doing a full operating system deployment, if you're looking to do a virtual desktop management, PC mobile device management, Windows Server, and so forth deployments, that's when you're going to have to look at something like Configuration Manager to move a little bit deeper into that type of infrastructure. So what are your target customers? When you think about Intune, I think you've probably thought about a couple of your customers that could probably be a good fit for EMS and Intune specifically, right? But pretty simple, right? Employees who use their own devices. What company that you know of today does not have users bringing in their own devices to access email or to get to some corporate information, right? Maybe you've got a distributed workforce. Like I said, that serverless society where you're realizing that you don't necessarily need a server on site, but you've got all these devices you've got to manage. Do you have customers like that? Are some of your customers using software as a service as well as on-premises applications? Maybe, right? If they are using both, how do we bring them all together and provide that single sign-on capability? If someone is responsible for confidential data, how do we protect that data? How do we protect it from leaking outside of the company, for example? Do they have to comply with regulations? Using EMS as a way to say, look, I am being compliant, that I am securing my information, it's a good first step for making that business even more secure. So just a couple of things on the right-hand side there that could definitely benefit from EMS. Healthcare, retail, schools, manufacturing, legal services. It's almost every vertical that has any type of mobile device type of strategy needs to think about a tool like EMS, and I think we've got a great value for you from Microsoft. So when I think about the EMS partner opportunity, hopefully many of you on the phone are going to be managed service providers, for example. This is an example of a customer that has 50 seats. So when you think about the EMS subscription on its own, the retail cost would be about $5,250 for the licenses for those 50 seats. When you think about your project services that you're going to add as an MSP, there's going to be that initial deployment and implementation. And we look at that as approximately 70% of that license cost. So you're going to make the margin on EMS. You're going to make the margin on your implementation, right? You always make more margin on services than you do on the product themselves, right? But you're also going to have to teach your end customers how to use Intune the first time. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory once you get into the portal, but that training is still a component that you're going to want to do in that first year to get everyone up to speed on how to use Microsoft Intune. And once they get the ball rolling, it'll almost seem like second nature. But obviously, your managed services, the ongoing help desk support, managing those third-party applications that they're going to have inside of EMS, checking up on that security alert and monitoring, and also making sure that everything is maintained. These are things that you're familiar with selling right now. So build it into your sales motion today. And what's great about this is that EMS is actually available through Tech Data's Cloud Solution Provider program. If you're not familiar with CSP, CSP allows me to do a number of different things, and let me build this out right here as a Microsoft partner. Hopefully today you are already talking to Tech Data about CSP and selling Office 365, but did you know that we also sell EMS as well as CRM Online through CSP, and Azure is there as well if you want to speak to our team, and I've got a slide for you here in just a second to talk about that. But here with CSP, you get to set the price directly with your customers. So you might not want to sell them, quote-unquote, EMS on its own. You might want to sell JJ's mobility services package. That includes Office 365, and that includes EMS, includes Azure, it includes CRM Online, but it includes everything. So I go to a customer, I say, Mr. Customer, on a monthly basis for $100 a month per user, I'm going to be able to protect your infrastructure. I'm going to be able to protect all your apps, all of your devices, give you access to Office, give you unlimited Microsoft communications through Skype. I'll be able to, allow you to protect all your documents in SharePoint and OneDrive, and all that's going to allow me to do this from any device. How does that sound? $100 a month, for example, right? And that includes all my managed services. So when you bundle EMS into CSP, you're not even thinking about the cost of that $52.50 that I showed you on that earlier slide. That's the retail cost. With EMS, you set the price, you set the terms. You, as the CSP provider through Tech Data, get to provision and manage those subscriptions. And because you're that provisioning partner, you get to take care of all the support and make sure that that your customer is always going to be up to date. So here you go. You create that cloud subscription or partner offer like I managed, like JJ's Mobility Services for $100 a month. You set the package price and sell it to the customers. You place that order for EMS through TechData CSP. Hopefully you're doing that alongside Office 365 and CRM Online, and then you offer that single package solution to your end customer. So it's pretty awesome stuff. Now, what I wanted to lastly leave with you here is the fact that I talked about a lot of stuff, right? And I talked about Microsoft Intune as being part of EMS. I almost used it interchangeably. That's because it has become second nature for me to think about Intune as being part of EMS and just talking about EMS. You know, as a reseller, as a partner, I know that you have to get, into the weeds with the individual products, but when I talk to my end customer, I don't talk about it like that. I talk about the whole solution. So my point is, you might need some help getting started, but you've got some things on the books that you think that EMS would really be a good fit for, along with a burgeoning Azure practice. Did you know that Tech Data and Microsoft are working together to put together the Azure Mentor Program for partners? So if you have some deals in the pipeline that look like EMS is a good fit for, that maybe Azure Infrastructure services are good for as well, think about talking to a contact that I'll have on the next page. We're going to help you accelerate your sales cycle. We're going to give you a mentor who will help you do proof of concept and deployment shadowing to make sure that you're offering the best thing for your customers. And the hope is that within 6 months, our Azure mentors and EMS mentors, right, are going to help you deploy at least 5 Azure solutions and help you get your Silver Cloud Platform competency. So there's just a couple weeks left to enroll in this program. And what I wanted to leave you here on the bottom right-hand side is the contact name at Tech Data to help you get started with the Azure Mentor Program. I keep on saying Azure Mentor Program because that's what it's called, but it also includes EMS, and that's why it's part of this webcast. But again, you're going to get a name point of contact. You're going to get a customized training plan, and you're going to get assistance through the sales cycle. The ask from us is that you have stuff in the pipeline you're not that this would be a good fit for, and that your goal is to successfully deploy 3 to 5 Azure Infrastructure as a Service solutions or EMS solutions within the 6-month participation process. So again, talk to Matt Hamilton. There's the email address and phone number down there at the bottom of the slide. And we really hope that you're going to start off and get going with EMS. And here's some more information about our Tech Data Cloud team. We're always here to help. Microsoft at techdata.com. Just look us up also at experiencetechdata.com and call the Microsoft team directly. There's the 800 number for Tech Data, and there is the 82031 extension. All right, so let me go and see if there's any more questions in the queue here. Natalie, did you get any questions while I was delivering the presentation?
I did. So the first one says, can Intune monitor Windows servers?
That's a good question, and that's something that has not changed since we developed Intune. Intune, and the way I want you to think about it, is a mobile, quote-unquote, device strategy, right, that we've got, and that only pertains to Windows PCs and desktops, as well as mobile devices. It does not include any server OSs at this time. Kind of in passing, you might have realized that I talked about the fact that if you do want to manage servers right now, you might want to take a look at adding a System Center Configuration Manager component to your infrastructure.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Next one says, if my customer currently has Office 365 today, can I still sell them EMS?
Yes, and so I want to make sure that I spell this out clearly, right? If you've got an Office 365 environment, because I mentioned that Office 365 runs on Azure Active Directory, you're not having to spin up an additional Azure Active Directory with EMS. You actually are extending what you have in Office 365 and quote-unquote giving it more power so that you now have not only great productivity but also protected mobile devices, so they work hand in hand together. And we look at it as a great upsell. And in fact, if you have a customer today who has Office 365 and you just come to this webcast, talk to them about securing all their mobile devices with EMS. Great.
Okay, and then I see, what is the minimum number of seats necessary for EMS?
That's a great question because, when I see the word enterprise in Enterprise Mobility Suite, I'm thinking, wow, this is only going to fit my customers that have 100 seats, 1,000 seats. You can just buy one license of EMS and protect that one device inside of a business. So if that's if it's like a small law firm, right, and they only have the main lawyer and maybe his or her administrative assistant because they're just starting off, this is still a great fit, right? Still offer them JJ's mobility services for $100 a month. It doesn't matter the size, and again, you can start off with just one.
Great. And then someone asked, will this deck be available after the webinar? And yes, it will be. I can send it out to all attendees.
Perfect. Hey, I know we're about out of time here. Thank you everyone for joining our webcast today. We're looking forward to seeing you sell some EMS and contact us if you want to join the Azure Mentor program. Appreciate it, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. This does conclude today's webinar. You may now disconnect.